Hello everyone, my name is David Ogborn, and I have the pleasure of introducing this panel on educational applications of the Estuary live coding platform, with contributions from Ian Hattwick, Agathe Herrou, Abhinay Khoparzi, Clarissa Littler, Kofi Oduro, Antonio Roberts, D. Andrew Stewart, Eldat Zabari, and J. Simon Van Der Berg. I know that we're all really grateful to be a part of this year's Digital Humanities Summer Institute, and looking forward to the exchanges of knowledge it will bring. Estuary is a collaborative web-based platform for live coding. By live coding, I mean a practice where people write and change small computer programs in order to explore their results. Frequently, the results of live coding are aesthetic in nature: music, sound, visuals, and other things we might think of as artistic media. It's also common for the code and its result to be shared with others, an audience, as it evolves. This visibilizing of code makes live coding a distinctive and powerful site for thinking about, learning about, and unsettling computation. The Estuary platform is currently about 5.5 years old and has been developed as the focus of a series of interrelated SSHRC-funded research projects. What began as a project to explore alternate notations around the tidal cycle's language for musical pattern has become a substantial web-based platform whose most distinctive feature is an emphasis on the interoperation of different heterogeneous live coding languages within a unified collaborative interface. There are many reasons why one might want to use multiple programming languages at the same time, because of particular results they facilitate, because of familiarity or convenience to particular ways of thinking, because of particular connections with so-called natural language, for the poetic or literary possibilities they represent, or perhaps for the sake of exploring collisions and interactions between different languages. I'm now going to take a minute to demonstrate basic multilingual live coding interaction with the Estuary platform. Using a web browser, I connect to estuary.mcmaster.ca. I am then greeted by Estuary's homepage with 4 options: About, Tutorials, Solo, Collaborate. For this demo, I'm going to pick Solo. I now see a series of panels in rows and columns, and in these panels I can type text code. Above each panel is a drop-down menu where I can select which programming language to use to interpret my code. In one panel, I'll enter a small program in the tidal cycle's language for musical pattern created by Alex McLean. After I enter the program and press Shift-Enter or click the Evaluate button, which looks like a play icon, the code is evaluated and I begin to hear the resulting music. Now in another panel, I'll enter a small program in the punctual language for audio visuals. In this case, a small program to visualize the audio results. Now I'll make a series of changes to both programs to begin to explore the possibilities that are adjacent to where we've started. So I've just been able to explore audiovisual live coding without any requirement to install any special software, although certainly with a requirement for a certain level of hardware quality and internet access. I've done this exploration by myself, working in solo mode, but it is far more common for Estuary to be used in its collaborative mode. If I reload the page and I go to Collaborate instead, I see a list of ensembles in which I can do more or less the same thing I just demonstrated, but in a collaborative space where others in the same space can see and experience the same programming operations and results. This question, what are the educational possibilities and implications of web-based multilingual live coding, is something that all of the panelists are going to address in different ways. Personally, I've had the good fortune to try this stuff out with thousands of people in different settings, including with elementary, secondary, and university students, with artists and community members, and with researchers at academic conferences. I think our panelists will have more to say about some of these different settings. I do want to offer one general thought from my own experiences with this, though. Something I have been struck by across all of these different settings is how often very different groups of learners tend to ask similar questions and encounter similar challenges. Perhaps as this work goes forward, we will start to better identify nuances of how these practices can be adapted to and unfolded for and with specific groups of learners. That potential differentiation notwithstanding, I think it's interesting to think about the educational space created by live coding as a prismatic one, in which different people explore computation together and in similar ways, despite or across their differences, with a removed or relaxed requirement to create things that function in particular instrumental ways. Before handing the floor over to the other panelists, I'd like to reflect on the relationship of this work to the land on which it happens. I'm recording this video in Hamilton, Ontario, at the southwest corner of Lake Ontario, close to McMaster University, where I work and where a majority of the direct labor of developing and providing the Estuary platform happens. This is the traditional lands of the Mississauga and Haudenosaunee people, lands protected by the Dish with One Spoon Wampum Agreement, which I understand as mandating all to equitably and responsibly share the resources of the Great Lakes region. I see the Estuary platform as a product of these colonially appropriated, industrially abused lands, and also as something that must be shared, according to the Dish with One Spoon Agreement. Simply being free and open source software isn't enough here. I think we have to continue to think through how this platform, as well as our practice and research of live and creative coding, are complicit with long-standing and ongoing colonial projects that need to be interrupted and reversed. I invite discussion and collaboration towards that end. I'd like to thank the research assistants who are currently helping with Estuary development, Alejandro Franco Briones, Luis Navarro del Angel, and Jessica Rodriguez, as well as the members of the Cybernetic Orchestra, McMaster University's live coding laptop orchestra, and the members of the globally distributed Supercontinent Ensemble. Both ensembles have been helping advance multilingual live coding by exploring it in their regular practice. Finally, I'd like to thank my fellow panelists for their generosity in joining this panel, and everyone at DHSI for your attention and insights this summer. We now turn to a series of 5-minute contributions by each panelist, in alphabetical order by last name, with each panelist preceded by an introductory slide. Our first panelist is Ian Hattwick.
I'm Ian Hattwick, lecturer in music technology at MIT, and also the director of Family, the MIT Laptop Ensemble. Family is a relatively young ensemble, having just started in 2019, and we've been working with networked music performance from the very beginning. But while our first few semesters were focused on network performance in a concert hall, I always intended to explore live coding with the ensemble, so the shift to remote learning provided an opportunity for that. Our fall 2020 season was the first time we've used a live coding language as an ensemble, and we chose to focus on using Estuary as our main performance environment. Now, one of the most attractive elements of live coding is the fact that all of the information necessary to generate sound is embedded within the code, making it easy to exactly duplicate a sonic process in order to mimic and then further develop musical ideas. The most basic implication of this is that it's easy to copy and paste musical moments. Much of our process of learning Tidal, as well as developing compositions, took place through the use of online text documents and spreadsheets, often with short code snippets to illustrate a particular function and context. Our mini Tidal cheat sheet, in particular, became a place to consolidate knowledge around functions and syntax as well as musical applications. As we explored how to express musical ideas through Tidal, we began to keep another shared composition spreadsheet in which we could save code examples. We would go back and refer to these examples across multiple rehearsals, and as ensemble members began to create compositions, we often kept the same document structure for capturing our musical ideas. One implication of this is that a tension began to develop between the ability to explicitly design musical moments and the ability to describe the trajectory of a composition over time. In our earlier practices, before using Estuary, we would often describe the trajectory of a composition using graphic notation or some other temporal description. Using Estuary, compositions became much more focused on designing specific musical moments, and then in performance we would gradually modify our code to transition between these precomposed chunks. The only composition whose plan included a clear sense of temporal progression also contained the most minimally described musical elements, and was in fact based around the idea of conducting the development of the piece through example. In this piece, the performer on the left is the conductor, and most of the other performers are imitating the conductor's code, following the conductor through the addition of new patterns and transformations. While imitating the overall structure of the conductor's code, each performer also adds specific predefined modifications, such as octave shifts, and is also able to freely make modifications to vary their musical output. The creation of this piece was in response to my original expectation that in rehearsal and performance, the ability to see each other's code would lead to a lot of imitation and parallel development of ideas. But in practice, I found that performers tended to stay focused on their own code box, and became difficult to mentally parse the functionality of other performers' code as the code became more complex. Now, this problem partially arose from our decision to assign each performer their own code box, and this is not enforced by Estuary, but arose out of practical considerations, both due to the technical challenges that happen when two performers edit the same code box, but also due to the desire of performers to have autonomy as they explore different musical and technical ideas. So while the piece described above represents one way of trying to break performers out of their own box, Estuary also includes a roulette mode, which creates a specific format to make it easier for performers to share a code box. So in the roulette mode, performers are able to lay claim to a code box for a short period of time, making any additions or modifications they wish before ceding control of the code box to another performer. So this sequential turn-taking approach encourages performers to analyze other performers' code and also to be able to gain an understanding of that code by freely modifying it. Overall, our experience with using Estuary was a lot of fun, and it helped us to understand both the implications of live coding for ensemble performance, as well as some of the technical challenges of expressing music in this way. Several of the ensemble members went on to create their own live coding languages, building upon concepts from Estuary and Tidal cycles, so the knowledge gained from working with Estuary continues to inform our developing practice as an ensemble.
Hello, my name is Agathe Herrou. I am a PhD student in computer science and also a Tidal cycles hobbyist. In June 2020, I was invited by Gabriel Rouet, coordinator of the Modern Music Department in the Conservatoire of Montluçon, to give an introductory workshop to his students about Tidal cycles and live coding. We had met during another such workshop that I gave for a collective aiming at popularizing electronic music making processes, and we were trying to replicate this experience for his students. Given that we were in the middle of the COVID-19 pandemic, this presentation had to take place online. We decided to use Discord for vocal and video communication, and Estuary for the practical part of the workshop. Estuary offered the dual advantage of requiring no installation, other than the one of a compatible browser, and allowing us to practice synchronously in the same virtual space. The students I had to work with were students of various ages and of various degrees of familiarity with computers, and had basically no experience with programming. And they were studying at the modern music department, of which Gabrielle was teaching. They thus had some background in modern music, by which I mean popular music in the broadest sense, from the second part of the 20th century to the beginning of the 21st. And this included electronic music, but they were not specialists of electronic music. The workshop was in two parts. First, a theoretical presentation about tidal cycles and the culture of live coding, and then a collaborative practical session where students were invited to try their hand to live coding on Estuary. The practical part consisted of first a demo of essential tidal function and features by myself in the same Estuary room to which all participants had access, then followed by an invitation to apply what they had just learned. The participation to the practical session was very shy, with students manifestly trying to assimilate and apply what they had just learned, but without getting yet to the stage of musical creation as I would have hoped. One obvious factor to this relative failure was obviously the lack of time to really assimilate the presented notion of Haskell programming at tidal cycles, but I can also identify a couple others. First, I think the overall structure of a theoretical introduction followed by a practice session was unbalanced, at least in this case, because I devoted too much time to theory and did not give them enough time to experiment with what they had just learned. So also the structure of the practical part in particular was not the wisest choice in retrospect. I think the amount of information presented was probably overwhelming, especially given that the audience was not especially familiar with programming and they were not specialists of electronic music. We can contrast this with the previous workshop I mentioned earlier in this video, where the audience was, in that case, already familiar with electronic music concepts, and where the workshop was actually able to evolve into a mini jam session, presumably because they were able to connect the code constructs I had just shown them with already known concepts. Also, it would have probably been better to start by introducing a minimal tidal pattern without getting too much into the details, and then just let them play with the pattern, modify it, and experiment with it. And only when they are familiar with it, introduce more advanced concepts and maybe a glimpse of the theoretical workings. Some of the tracks I can think of to explore could be to gamify the practice by giving them maybe more directed exercises, or by playing the game called Roulette, where each player takes their turn in modifying the code, thus forcing them to engage with the code. So I'm giving here a rather critical view of this experience, but the feedback was however rather positive. Even though the actual live coding on the side of the students stayed minimal, it gave them the opportunity to discover a musical practice that they might not have been exposed to otherwise. It might not have turned them into live coders right away, but it has broadened their horizons, and maybe have even planted a seed. Thank you for your attention.
Hi, I'm Bina Kupji and I'm an independent artist, musician, curator from Allahabad in the north of India. Then my own artistic practice, I also instigate community events in the region by engaging with creative coding groups as well as through a collective called Algorithm India. So we promote live coding and algorithmic arts practices in the country by putting on events and workshops across different disciplines. I had looked at Estuary as a possible platform for teaching tidal cycles early in, I think, 2018, but only got around to becoming fluent with its quirks, which were more apparent back then, after joining the Supercontinent Ensemble later that year. At first, it was just another tool in my bag, including Jibber or Hydra, to quickly show off live coding as a first contact with programming for musicians, artists, and younger folk. But as it often does with in other places, the appeal of tidal cycles are all more like mini tidal syntax, and the way it lets you create the most amount of noise per character makes it very useful to introduce making music with patterns and code. So in early 2020, just before the lockdowns due to the pandemic started, I had started doing these weekend remote sessions on Jitsi and Google Meets with people from various creative coding groups across the country. It was great to have people, especially like other organizers and community stakeholders, suddenly talk to each other a lot more. Because I had noticed a lot of these communities, especially in the bigger cities, were almost working in silos. Sometimes to the extent that different groups in the same city weren't even talking to each other and like sharing information. All of this changed as the year progressed, and we had more sessions and random jams with people making noise in a sort of like a algorithmic free improv, which was great. I ended up connecting with some music schools, or more like instructors and course directors in those schools, who wanted to expose their students to live coding and other computational and algorithmic composition tools. These workshops usually happen in like closed door sessions with participants either coming from that specific institution or that event organizers network. At the end of April this year, I have also started doing these open access tutorials on Instagram Live. I would record these short snippets of live coding that I can talk people through as we go along on that lesson plan that I've been using for the past year. This has also been interesting as I have other live coders drop in on the stream, and I can like point out to the audience like the other works through my shoutouts. To conclude, I will look at all of these activities as both successes as well as unproven failures. I've seen a lot of enthusiasm and minds being blown with the possibility of having to like Estuary and how people can jam with other people from 2,600 kilometers away. But I still haven't seen much follow up. And after a few weeks of playing with Mini Tidal and Hydra, I don't hear back from most folks. This could also be just because of the emotional fatigue of the crazy year we have had. And maybe the seeds that we have planted are yet to show their fruit in this part of the world.
Hi, so my name is Clarissa Littler. I'm a programmer and teacher based in Portland, Oregon, and this year through Portland Community College, I've been teaching workshops on live coding with both tidal cycles, like the full desktop install, and Estuary, which is more the topic of today. So the workshops we've been doing are after school programs and weekend workshops and things like that. And they've been largely aimed at the high school and late middle school age. They're for youth who have no prior experience in either music production or coding. And these have they've had a fairly limited number of contact hours, generally less than 6 or 10 for a particular cohort. And so all that being said, I really like teaching live coding as a first contact with programming, and I really like using Estuary. There's a lot to pick up and a lot of depth to dig into, but it also doesn't take a lot to get started making a simple beat and title or making some reactive visual piece in Punctual. Punctual does more than just visual components like what you can see on the screen now, but in the workshops I've been doing, I've been kind of dividing the labor between mini title to do music and Punctual to do reactive visuals. And so this means that even though this is a textual programming, as opposed to like block-based programming, like a Scratch or a Snap, or even, the newer Tinkercad blocks thing, right? So even though this is textual programming, there's a lot of real immediate feedback that I think helps get over sort of that hump of learning how to deal with syntax, because that is a real problem with youth education programming. Your fingers have to learn that this is a situation where every character counts and where it's put counts, and that's always a learning curve. But when things are immediately, they work or they don't work, or you can hear how they work and you can tinker with them, that's a pretty big difference for first contact with programming, at least in my opinion. And the collaborative functions that Estuary has they're really cool. But funnily enough, I think one of the coolest things about doing these workshops for youth and using the collaborative functions of Estuary is that they're really good for debugging. Like, I've never had a situation before where I could just put my cursor at the right spot in the student's code remotely and be like, here, like, I think you have a typo here and we can talk about it. Or like, I can navigate to like another panel that a student isn't using and then, type something and be like, okay, is this the kind of thing you were thinking of? Like, you described to me what you meant to do, and here, is this the kind of thing you wanted to do? Oh, is it? Okay, then try modifying this. And then, they can just kind of copy and paste live from there and then tweak that and make, have it as a reference. And that's just really cool. Like, I've been teaching, programming to youth for about 5 years now, and I don't think I've really had that experience any other way. And so some of the best parts of teaching live coding to youth, some of those best moments have been when you get a cohort that's really eager to kind of one-up each other, not in a mean way, but like a friendly, playful way of like hearing what someone else has done and trying to be like, oh, wait, okay, now that gave me an idea and I want to do something else. And so like there's some really cool moments there. There's times where someone's like, no, my beat is fire, you can't handle this, and then like wants to do it. And so that being said, I feel like there's still one thing I haven't gotten to do as much as I would like is more just guided ensemble work. I think this needs some kind of equivalent of a conductor, and I haven't been sure how to do that for youth, but I think that's going to be a thing that's, the more people are involved in using tools like this, the more we'll have an opportunity to play with it and try things and figure out how to do these curricula that are ways of having youth working together in more guided, more less intimidating fashion. Because I think there's a lot of exciting room to develop new practices and try new ways of collaborative, project-based, arts-focused teaching. So yeah, I really like using Estuary for this.
Hello, my name is Kofi Oduro. Also in creative circles, I go by Ellis Preacher. I am a creative coder and multidisciplinary artist based in Montreal, Quebec. Starting in 2020, I have incorporated more of Estuary into my workflow of creation, performance, and what I will be describing in this presentation, education. After realizing a pattern within my work, I came to a conclusion that I can use the Estuary platform for world building, in particular role playing, where the user not only uses Estuary to live code music and or visuals, but a platform to explore a character and have it done in a sort of interactive fiction way. Everything is going fast. What direction do you take? What direction is real? Which world is fake? as it went from night to day, and the music has its pace. Are you one with the world? Are you one with the space? Are you one letting it? As just witness, Estuary lends itself well due to its already cyber-futuristic layout with panels to building such worlds that are really ingrained in science fiction. And what you just saw is part of a series that I will showcase people when I am doing such workshops or such educational speaks at various levels on how live coding does not only mean live, but also means a creative process that you can extend beyond the live experience. And with that being said, I pondered, why don't I try to make a game? I am into narrative design, and due to the different subsections of Estuary, this is actually attainable through different means, as there are different languages that are capable of doing both visuals and sound, and some can do one or the other. And then if we add a humanistic approach, maybe we can talk about what is in the world and what is human-computer interaction when the humans and computer are truly interacting. Universes away. How would you react to the blue and the red? What is your verdict? What is your desire? Are you going to respond with code that visualize? Or are you going to attack with visuals? Visuals or sound? What you just saw with the planets as panels actually arrived from when one of the first instances of this play experience was done at Tulane University for an Afrofuturism class, where we took elements of what the teacher was saying about music and about the art and trying to magnify it by having its own planet, its own way of playing. And this is something that followed along with many other workshops, where the concept of code was not the main factor, but rather a way to elevate what was already taught, what was already learned. Where code mixes with not only music and visuals, but also philosophy, archaeology, sociology, biology. And this is why I think it's very good assessment to show to the rest of the digital humanities, because it does show a way that everything can come together to make a new type of presentation. Because when we were doing it at that university and a couple other workshops called Expression of Oneself, people were taking the knowledge that they already had and trying to implement that into code. So it changed the experience of where code is not just these numbers and mathematical notations, but rather a reflection of what is within oneself that allows and is allowed to grow and flourish. And a lot of people had fun trying to learn how to do different systems, different this, or when it was their turn to change the planet, they had fun. And that's what code can be. Code doesn't have to be a dread. It can be something fun. And sometimes things are fun when we do it together.
Hello, my name is Antonio Roberts and I'm an artist and curator based in Birmingham in the UK. In April 2021, I was invited by Company Drinks to deliver a series of in-person workshops as part of the Newtown Culture Programme. As the workshops were for children and young people in social care, they were classed as essential work and so could take place in person with physical distancing, PPE and other precautions in place. Planning for the workshops faced a few technical difficulties. Newtown Culture hired laptops for these workshops, and I immediately knew it would be impossible to install the music programming language Tidal Cycles on them. It would be very time-consuming liaising with the hire company on installing all libraries and dependencies, and it could be costly if the hire company were to additionally charge for their time. Thankfully, this is where Estuary saved the day. It provided a ready-to-use version of Tidal Cycles that only required a web browser to be installed. The 7 participants were aged from around 10 to 15 and had experience with using computers, but this seemed to be mostly with word processing and web browsing. 2 of the participants had some exposure with programming, mostly through Scratch and a bit of Python. Also, only 2 participants described themselves as having musical talent or an active interest in making music. With this knowledge, I started the workshop by introducing them to the idea of using patterns to make music, comparing music programming to step sequencers and drum machines. I then introduced them to Estuary. We started in solo mode with headphones, which allowed them to become familiar with the environment without the pressure of performing in front of others. They took to the Estuary interface and Tidal Cycles really well and appeared to be enjoying exploring the different samples. The following day we collaborated using ensemble mode, which is where I feel the participants were most creative. As the workshop host, I plugged my laptop into loudspeakers so that the whole ensemble could hear the music. What followed was a really fun 30-minute performance. Here's a few excerpts from it. One of the benefits of using Estuary is that I could fix the errors in their code without having to be physically present at their computers, which is a bonus considering the physical distancing requirements. Occasionally I would also change their code or add in new functions, as a way to introduce them to new possibilities. This of course raised a few questions about these new functions, which I was more than happy to answer. Overall, I was really happy to use Estuary as it made planning and running the workshops a smooth process, but it also gave the participants a tool which they could use to continue learning creative programming.
I'm pleased to be participating in this DHSI presentation on live music coding. My name is D. Andrew Stewart, and I have assembled a brief live coding show reel of musical activities at the University of Lethbridge. Live coding is a form of algorithmic composition and sound design. In the context of an improvising music ensemble, we ask how collaborative live coding can be used to compose new music and design new sound effects for, or to, visual media, such as live video gameplay. We relate our activities to the improvisational practices of early cinema.
1, 2, 3.
The exploration of timbre, which live coding provides, is boundless. For instance, students enjoy creating new soundscapes for virtual reality environments, and they enjoy creating new music to accompany narratives.
And they look back. They realize the creature is a large spider. And they ask the spider if they may be
A high degree of collaboration is the most valuable aspect that live coding provides to the music ensemble. Ensemble members are required to have an analytical mindset while studying and, in some cases, literally correcting each other's code in real time during a music concert. This concludes my brief contribution from Lethbridge, Alberta, which is part of the Siksikaitsatapi, or Blackfoot Confederacy, and is on Treaty 7 and Métis 3 territory. Thank you for watching.
Hello, I'm Dr. Eldat Zabari from Concordia University in Montreal, where I coordinate electroacoustic studies. I've used Estuary for many years in various situations, often in live coding, shared live coding performances, but often in other educational settings as well. At Concordia, we do a lot of telematic network performances, especially with the laptop orchestra, Concordia Laptop Orchestra, or CLORC. Mostly we gather on location and we play telematically with other ensembles, sometimes with the Cybernetic Orchestra at McMaster, directed by David Ogborn, and sometimes in various venues like the MAC, the Montreal Contemporary Art Museum. And this time, however, due to the pandemic, it's the first time where the CLORC is fully telematic, where every one of its 25 members are at home, and we're jamming using various networked audio platforms. But of course, Estuary came in very handy for jamming live coding. And it's also Estuary is the one platform that solved the problem of latency perfectly and very accessibly. Now, we worked for a performance in March, and because Estuary live coding for 25 people together is a bit much, so we broke into 4 ensembles for the rehearsals, where people were assigned randomly into these ensembles every week, different ensembles. And Estuary is perfect in a way that people can help each other. For many people, Estuary and Mini Tidal and Punctual have been new. So it's perfect for people to help each other, because not only you can see each other's code, you can actually modify each other's codes, right? And help others with their syntax and share through the chat, share resources. But once the performance itself came, we had one ensemble in the performance of 8 members, but they were exchanging. So basically the entire orchestra could sort of go through, going in and out, and one continuous performance. I'll play 2 excerpts from that performance. It's called Spring Song from March 2021. So as you can see, the 2 excerpts had a reshuffling of the ensemble of the members. Now, we don't always do live coding performances. Clark is a very wide and very interdisciplinary performance environment where we perform with other people, with other artists, other practices. And sometimes we use Estuary in a different way. Instead of like as our main platform, we use it as a supplemental live coding, particularly for visual, the audio responsive visual that you can do in Punctual. One performance like that was with a mini opera that we did. It was the last performance by Clark. I'll play 2 excerpts from that. And in this case, Estuary is basically the visual or part of the visual environment.
You probably won't have to cancel your travel plans. We probably won't send visitors back to their foreign lands. On and on, the messages droned, while no one really listened, except the algorithms on our phones.
So yes, Estuary can be used in multiple ways. I also use it for ear training, where students had to recreate melodies and rhythms by coding them on Mini Tidal. As generally, I see Estuary as a kind of a shared experimenting environment where people can play, learn together, coding, visuals, sound, music. So yes, thank you. That's all I have. I hope you enjoyed. Thank you very much for listening.
My name is Dr. J. Simon Van Der Berg. In my day job, I am head of the Master's Programmes in Music at the Royal Conservatoire of Scotland. Today, however, I'll be talking about a different context. Gamelan Nagamas are a community group here in Glasgow that I've been a member of for many years. We're a diverse group of people with varied interests in music, both amateur and professional, and we play a range of different kinds of music for and with the gamelan, from traditional Javanese pieces to new works, often devised by members of the group. In March of last year, we suddenly found ourselves unable to access the rehearsal room with our instruments in it as a result of the COVID pandemic. The concerts that we had coming up that we would have been rehearsing for were all cancelled. What to do? In particular, what were we going to do during our regular Thursday evening rehearsal slots? Was there some way we could keep the group going until such time as we could play together again? Like perhaps every amateur music ensemble in the world, we quickly found the limitations of trying to play together online. A weekly meet-up and chat over Zoom was fine and kept the personal connection between the group members going. Initial attempts at singing and maybe playing on improvised home instruments quickly introduced us both to the arcane world of so-called high-quality audio settings on Zoom and more intractably to the fundamental issue of latency. I had an idea, a crazy idea perhaps. As part of my own creative work as a composer and digital musician, I've worked for a number of years with SuperCollider, including performing code live on that platform. I'd also around that time started learning tidal cycles and had tried out mini-tidal in Estuary. My crazy idea was this. Maybe I could teach the members of my gamelan group how to live code, especially if we were able to upload samples of our own gamelan to Estuary. So this is in fact what happened. David Ogborn helped me to upload the instrumental samples, and I began trying to teach the group members how to code. Now, despite the fact that none of our group are in any way familiar with working with code, this project has turned out to be almost entirely successful. A year later, Nagamas have performed several online live-coded gamelan performances. Here is a very short clip of us improvising together in Estuary. Also, you can see we're using Zoom as a back channel for communication and also as a way for the audience to see us as we're coding. There are three things that I think have made this possible. The fundamental affordance of the Estuary programme is, of course, the ability to improvise music together, remotely, but synchronously. In fact, in terms of remoteness, our work with Estuary allowed an old friend of the group who's based in Ohio to play with us in Scotland on a Thursday evening. The second key aspect of Estuary is no install, apart from the very minimal requirement to get people to download and use the Chrome browser. I have in the past put myself in the position of doing workshops where we try to install SuperCollider on user machines in advance, and it didn't go particularly well. Thirdly, Tidal itself, particularly the mini-tidal dialect used in Estuary, has proved to be surprisingly easy for non-coders to grasp. Once we got over some basic hurdles like finding the hash key or realising that square brackets are different from parentheses, everyone in the group has managed to get at least an intuitive grasp of the syntax and been able to create satisfying musical gestures. In my teaching, I drew extensively on Alex McLean's Learning Tidal Cycles course, now available openly on club.tidalcycles.org, which I would heartily recommend. I used these as a model for a set of my own video tutorials and worksheets created specifically for my group, using gamelan sounds as examples rather than the usual sounds built into Tidal. I said this was almost entirely successful. Not everyone in the gamelan group came with us on this project. From a regular attendance of around 15 people, we've shrunk to a core of 6 to 7 people who have taken to coding. Others have drifted away, in one case, unfortunately, expressing feelings of being excluded from the group by our turn to code. For those that have stayed the course, though, this has, as far as I can tell, been an interesting and rewarding experience. None of them had to come with me on this journey. No one was getting graded for this. We were really just doing it for the fun and joy of playing music together in a time where it would have otherwise been impossible. It remains to be seen what will transpire when I once again have to cycle across town on a cold, dark and rainy Glasgow morning for yet another go in the rehearsal room at playing Lancia and Ritchik Ritchik. Will we all want to stay home and code instead?
Well, that's everyone. Thank you again to all the panelists for sharing these thoughts and for being a part of the adventure of multilingual live coding. Thank you to everyone for giving your attention to this panel. I look forward to further discussion at the DHCI session. Ciao!